This is the Freeheel Life Podcast, episode number 33. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Freeheel Life shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. And today we have another fantastic episode, if I do say so myself. And we're going to be joined by two of my longtime telemark friends, Weston Deutschlander and JT Robinson. And to give you guys, I've known these guys for a long time, but to give you guys a little intro into who they are, Weston moved out to the West from New York City December 2007 after he graduated from SUNY Cortland in upstate New York with a degree in sports management. He grew up visiting the Wind River Range in Wyoming and skiing across the West. And now he runs Inspired Summit Adventure Company with his wife, Shaun, and is based in Park City, Utah. And JT has been on the show before. You may recognize him from, I believe it was episode 9. And he's been around the telemark world for many moons, almost 2 decades. He's been in roles as an athlete, product tester, filmer, photographer, event organizer, and more. And he's currently pursuing his AMGA ski guide certification and guides here in Utah with various outfits, including Inspired Summit Adventure with Weston. So welcome to the show, you guys. How are you?
What's going on, everybody?
Good to be here, as always.
It's good to have you guys here. I was trying to remember I've known you guys for a long time. I couldn't remember if we had actually ever been on a trip together back in the day, because I was trying to think of the junk show trip to Norway with JT. That was a good one, but Weston, you weren't on that. But I don't think
we almost had that Alaska trip, but then that's when I got hurt.
Oh, that's right. We stayed with our buddy Dave McGoffin, who you set up. That was a pretty funny one. Anyways, one of these days we'll have to rehash some of those old stories because they're pretty funny. I was thinking, the Norway one Weston missed out on, and actually that's a funny story too with Dave McGoffin, because I honestly thought we were going on a yurt trip at the begining, which it kind of was, except it was a yurt on a corner lot in Girdwood, Alaska,
with a wood floor and big screen TV.
Yeah, and we were like,
how many do we have on the floor there?
Dude, there had to have been like 10 of us on the floor.
Yeah, we were like shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, and I remember it had that sweet Incinelate toilet.
I was just going to say the incinerator.
The incinerator toilet, but you had to pee outside, and there's like neighbors next door to the yurt. That was
you don't want to get the filters confused between the coffee and the incinerator.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for those of you that have no idea what we're talking about, we won't digress too much, but there's basically an incinerator toilet that you put like a giant coffee filter looking thing into it, and once you have utilized it, you open it up into the fiery jaws of the incinerator. So that was a pretty good one.
Yeah, and I think Weston and I did a trip for you down to...
we did the Tushers.
The Tushers.
Oh, yeah, with that Alec guy.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Ross and...
Oh, yeah, man, I forgot about that one. I still haven't... I've skied Eagle Point, but I have not skied those mountains, and that always looked pretty cool, that little yurt system that you guys did.
It is cool. That's one of my favorite adventures I did with Weston.
Yeah,
that was a fun trip.
Yeah,
that's cool. Well, so like I said, for those of you, if you haven't caught the earlier podcast I did with JT, you can kind of get the whole backstory on him and being from Wisconsin. Shout out to Wilmot. And Weston, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and kind of how you got into skiing, and then eventually kind of got into telemark.
Yeah, so I from Buffalo, New York originally, and both my parents were ski patrollers. One of them still is. My mom retired with like 46 years of ski patrolling, which still boggles my mind. And super small mountain. Mads and I did a trip out there, actually a really fun early season, one of the premier trips. We got that storm, and it was.
Oh yeah, I've talked about that on the podcast. Yeah, Holiday Valley Powder Day.
Yeah, and that never happened in like all my 20 years growing up there. Never had a powder day, and then went back east from the west with Madsen. We had it was amazing. So anyways, pretty small mountain. I think they say 650 feet, but its ski is more like 300 or 400. So both parents ski patrollers, skied a bunch every weekend. Was an alpine skier from I think 3 to 9, 9 to 14. I snowboarded, and I even went into the dark side of snowboarding. I was a hard booter. I was one of the
you carved?
Yeah, carved.
Ooh, nice.
Toe side carve on an alpine board. Pretty.
I didn't know that.
Putting your cheek to the snow is pretty cool. And then from 14 to now, I've been telemarking. The way I got into it was it was we called them the mountain men. They were like the mountain patrol. They're maintenance guys, but they went around on all the lifts, and they were climbing around all the lift towers. So they had the Vibram soles, and I saw them, and they're always out there and super nice. And they're like, dude, those guys look rad. So they kind of, they were doing it, but sorry, that similar timeline, my dad had taken me cross country skiing in Buffalo, and there was a sledding hill, and he showed me the telemark turn, because he had been telemark skiing since the 70s or something insane. And so he taught me the turn. I was like, wow, that's really sick. Then went back to the home mountain. That's where the mountain men were. They kind of took me underneath their wing and showed me, and I learned on leathers and 3-pins. I had a pair of 150 centimeter Rossi. They were tiny for, I was way smaller back then, but they were tiny for me. But my dad's boots were a little small on me. They'd munch the piss out of my feet. My feet would come out of my boots just bloody and raw. And then these mountain guys had the first pair of plastic telly boots that I'd ever been in. They were crispy CXRs or something. Oh, yeah. And my mind was just blown. I was like, what? This is stupid. And I was just kind of hooked from there. And then my first pair of boots that I bought were a pair of T1 Bumblebees. I think they were they're off eBay, size 13. I'm a size 10. And was just swimming in them, but loved it. And then, I kind of started skiing park, telemark, and I was always the super weirdo. That's when, terrain parks were just starting, and twin tips were kind of just coming out. My first pair of twin tips were these Atomic from the City Garage, from Trey and Shaun over there, and
Troublemakers.
Atomic, no, they were Atomic V bumps or something. They were
oh,
yeah, they had the beta, they had the raised top sheets with the quote unquote carbon in them. Anyways, so that was kind of my introduction to telemark. And then my dad patrolled at Whiteface, and I'd go up there and I'd see there's this one dude, Andrew Minier. Yeah, Minier. He was on the
from Kissing Bridge.
Yeah, and he was on the U.S. telemark team, and I remember sitting on the lift and just being like, holy shit, who is that guy? He rips. And because he was training for the team back then, and Whiteface was really made me a skier, because it was all ice and everything like that. And I'd park skis, so it was make a turn, slide 20 feet to the next potential not ice. It wasn't quite a mogul, and then make another turn and slide 20 or 30 feet with no edges and blue ice. And then went to university, went to college in central New York. It was mandated by my parents. And if I didn't graduate, then it didn't count. So I went to school back east, as opposed to I really wanted to go to Gunnison, Wasted State, but I knew I'd just start skiing and just be school's lame later. So finished up, and I was a bratty little kid that would email Madsen and be like, oh, you guys telemark? I'm coming out. And when my wife tells a story, which is probably truer to what Madsen dealt with, I had this annoying kid from Western New York. All he does is sit there and emails me and blah, blah, blah. And so I was for sure that. And I met Madsen like December 2007 or January 2008, right around in there. And yeah, right.
That's a long time ago. That's crazy. Because
crazy.
I was gonna say, I forgot, but weren't you on the cable forum? Were you on that?
I don't know.
Maybe not. Well, the cable was like a forum on freeheellife.com, like and it was all the park kids, dude.
Really?
Maybe you weren't on that. I always thought,
because that like Jeff Rakowski, one of those guys.
Yeah, all those guys were on that. That is where that whole like original kind of park group came from. Anyways,
I just remember being in Western New York, and like I'd watch all the Unparalleled movies and just scour the internet for like, are there people out there like me? Is there anyone else? And yeah.
I still do that. So is there anybody like me out there?
One in a million.
One in a million.
Because 07 you moved out here. Because I remember that's when I first skied with you at the canyons, and I remember you were the first guy, one of the first guys I ever saw with hammerhead bindings. That's all I remember.
Yeah, and it was actually because of those same mountain dudes, and I think I want to say the City Garage too, but like those guys had that binding. I was like, that thing is sick. I'm like, wait a minute, you mean I can move it around? And I was, and I kind of still am into like pretty active stuff. And man, the hammerhead was awesome. I remember like I did get my PSIA telemark 1 from like Mickey back in the day.
Mickey Stone?
Yeah.
Wow.
I got my PSIA
there you
from
go.
Mickey Stone. But I remember like teaching people and being like, well, you got to get on this binding because if you can bend it on a 5, like you're actually telemarking versus like fake marking or like DS it.
That's also what I remember from you is you were the first guy that had hammerhead on 5, and I didn't even know what that meant. And I just remember being like, what is hammerhead on 5? It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Weirdo from the beginning.
That's funny. Well, and part of the reason I wanted to have you guys on together is, I mean, which is funny because JT was more kind of the big mountain guy when I first met him. You were like a park guy at the beginning, and then obviously not, like you obviously did a lot of more big mountain stuff when we were shooting movies and stuff. But both you guys ended up in the guiding section, which is kind of why I wanted to have you guys both on. And we just had Tigerino on here talking about guiding too, but that was kind of I guess hopping over to JT. I want to hear kind of both. Like JT, how did you feel? How do you feel like you kind of ended up after all these years, sort of in more of a guiding role?
Well, I kind of secretly always knew it would kind of be the end of the road for me with that as kind of the end goal. Like I did the athlete thing as long as I could possibly pull it off. And then when I got hurt that year, like we were talking about when we all were supposed to go to Alaska and I broke my back and all that stuff, I was already in the process of starting to get like avalanche certifications and things like that. And when that injury came, that was like, okay, the athlete thing might start coming to an end even sooner than I originally thought. So ramped up the certification process and making that be kind of that natural evolution of that, because you guys are in the industry, so you kind of know how all that works, but it's like it all kind of feeds each other. So it was like do the pro ski thing, make the industry connections, get into like product tester type stuff, make more industry connections, and then through athlete stuff, you're meeting people in the community, you're doing all these trips, you're traveling around, meeting all these guide type folks and lodge owners and stuff like that. And then guiding or evolving into guiding kind of follows all those same connections and pathways and industry people and stuff like that. So it's like, it was kind of a natural evolution, and it was like I can build a reputation and be like through the athlete world, like, hey, people actually want to come out with me because they've heard my name and trust me that I've been a few places and done a few things. And so it was kind of always a natural evolution for me that I kind of had in mind all along, but I was hoping to just, do the athlete thing as long as possible. But as we all know, or at least us three know, like, athlete life has a definite time frame on it. Being able to push your body and even your mind into those more dangerous scenarios, one could say. But that's kind of, I always kind of saw guiding as the evolution of where I was at when I was younger, and so it was a pretty natural fit. And Weston actually him and Shaun started on that track even before me, and it's been nice having them like 2-3 steps ahead of me on the AMGA track to help me see the path. And I can always hit them up and be like, hey, I got this course coming, what can I expect, and what gear do I need, and stuff like that, and they can help me train up and stuff. Weston and I have done a few things on the UNS that were formative, especially when it comes to the snowmobile stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He's a much radder snowmobiler than me, so...
Weston, did you kind of see it? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, JT. I didn't mean to cut you.
No, yeah, that's about it.
I was kind of curious, like, Weston, did you ever see your... It's kind of funny thinking back, like, when you're talking about when we first met, and I'm like, did you see the guide thing ever as, like, part of some sort of an evolution, like, in the beginning of the whole thing, or... I guess...
I was pretty, like... I don't know, I was like a kid in a candy store. I couldn't think about anything except skiing. I couldn't think about, like, what I'm going to do with my life, a career, like, family, anything like that. I just wanted to ski, and more ski. And then the guiding stuff kind of, for me, what happened was, Shaun, my wife, she had been like a mountain bike guide for a long time, right? Like many years. And she kind of got me into the summertime guiding of stuff. And then, as my life kind of changed and got married and all that kind of stuff, she was like, hey, the working at night in the restaurant so you can just go ski all day, that's not quite fitting. And I was kind of seeing the writing on the wall too. Like, it's like, you can be a career server or you can, like, walk away and do something different. And I kind of, walked away from that. And then it was like, well, hey, I got to work. And by that point, I jokingly frequently say, like, I just ride my wife's coattails. My wife was working at the cat ski operation, Park City Powder Cats. And just like JT said, to have someone, mentor you or help you through the process or get your foot in the door it's all about not what you know about, but who you know. So that kind of evolved into it for me. And then from working at the cat ski operation with having our own business and how it's evolved and grown, now it became more of like, I'll try this out, or hey, this would be cool, to like pretty career-y. Very, very career-y.
Very career-y.
Very career-y.
Like when we all realize that it basically turns into a job, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about, like, that's the thing that's amazing about guiding is you get to go out and do what you love and make money at it. It was like we're all in the telemark world. We weren't exactly buying 6-figure houses off of the telemark world, and this was like, wait a minute, like, I think that was probably with a couple of exceptions, like the first time, like, being a pro skier, like getting, it's funny, like, you could say a ski instructor is a professional, but there's getting paid to go out and ski and getting paid to, like, go find good snow and have fun and psych people up. It's pretty cool. So
yeah. No, that's cool.
Yeah, and the stuff we got to do when we were doing all that content, filming, photo stuff, like, that's like dream making type stuff,
Yeah.
That world of pro skier was like pretty cool. That was like next level stuff. I was the same way with that, like, pinch yourself action, like, oh, we weren't making a lot of money by any means. We were making a little money, and we were skiing like that every day. And that was pretty cool stuff.
And it's a huge, and to elaborate too on what JT was saying, like that is like, oh my God, cool. Pinch yourself, because like when you're guiding, you're not skiing for yourself. You're not like doing whatever you want to do or going wherever you want to go. Like it's a totally different world. So to have that freedom and to push yourself and to be like, hey, I'm going to go over here and do this was freaking cool.
Yeah, it's cool to have watch you guys kind of getting into it, because it definitely seems like it's kind of rounding out all of the other experiences I've seen you guys, like you're talking about, like how we all met each other, but then seeing you guys get into the guide world and some of the courses you guys are taking, and it seems like it really kind of it makes you guys more complete skiers. It's inspiring that way for someone like me, because I'm like, oh wow, because you're doing coursework and you're really like tightening things up, like in terms of, even when I was like looking over stuff before talking to you guys today, it's like, the certifications you guys are getting, and whether it's like CPR or first aid woofer, your ARI classes, stuff like that. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's really cool to see like what you guys have been able to kind of elaborate the experience of snow travel and all that. So
yeah, and like all that stuff for me at least, and Weston probably the same way, but all that stuff feels like building on top of all that stuff we did before, like all those experiences. Like we kind of came into it almost backwards, where we had all these experience first from being backcountry skiers on the pro side for a decade, and then going into all this cert stuff and like almost capstoning all of that experience with the more formal education stuff, and like coming into some of this core stuff, and like you're looking at the peers and you're in there with, and you're like, oh well, I actually have 20 years of experience doing this stuff already. So now I'm just kind of like formalizing a lot of this stuff, which is like kind of a cool evolution of all of it. And like you said, it's kind of like rounding off the career path to a certain degree, and like formalizing all this stuff we've been building for quite a long time.
Are you guys both on the AMGA ski track? Is that what you guys are both working on, or?
Weston, you're already apprentice, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, Weston.
That doesn't sound like an
further along than me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, talking to Ty in that last episode, it sounds like a bit of a slog. I mean, like it's some, you guys are putting in the work for sure.
Is Ty fully certified?
No, I think he's in that apprentice phase as well, I believe.
Yeah.
And I actually got on the website after that and was like looking at it. I mean, it's
heavy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work. And he made a really good point about it, that peak guiding season generally falls during the coursework.
Yeah.
Which I was like, oh man, that is brutal. Because if you're like, if you're someone that's our age and you're trying to knock that out, it's like, that's got to be almost a little frustrating, because you're trying to like make money at the thing you're also trying to like become this thing. It's all at the same time, so
it's a massive double whammy.
Yeah
Massive.
Yeah, and I think it's been nice, and maybe for Weston too, but like for me, with all the experience I have, I've been able to get jobs almost ahead of the curve. And so I don't have to like do as much coursework. I don't have to cram as much in as quickly. I can kind of chip away at it a little more. And I'm already working. So it's like all of my years of experience gave me the connections and got me in the door and got me the jobs. And now I can chip away at the AMGA stuff, which for a lot of folks who didn't come at it the way we did, they had to do all that stuff first, which is like even heavier, because they're not cheap courses either, and the time and all of that comes with it. So I think I've been pretty lucky in that respect, is I just kind of chip away at it, like 1-2 courses a year, and am working the whole time as it goes. So
yeah, is that,
we had talked about kind of previous to this, Josh. You had shared that article about like kind of an outlook on the guiding industry, and I think what's going on currently, with the pandemic and stuff like that, will probably have a direct correlation to the AMGA and kind of the future of that kind of stuff.
how do you think it'll affect it?
I just think with it's hard, and I go back and forth with this like all the time, and hopefully there's no future AMGA examiners listening to the podcast. But it's like every time I'm on the fence, I'm like, one day I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh my God, the AMGA is great. And then the other morning I'll wake up and I'll be like, this sucks. And or it's just not worth it or whatever. And then I get out, even after courses, I'm like, wow, that was a lot. Like, how much did I get out of it? But
I guess that's kind of one point to make there real quick is you don't have to be AMGA to be a guide.
Yep, for sure.
And that's kind of where he's coming from.
Yeah, it's kind of like Ty was saying that to me, explaining that too. Like even now it's kind of changing because in the past there was a lot of people that weren't on that track but made great careers out of guiding, and that now it's kind of like cinching down on the idea that that certification's increasingly important to have in order to kind of validate and kind of make it more consistent across the board.
Big time. And like JT was saying, like, the U.S. is viewed by the international guiding community as behind the eight ball, a bunch of cowboys, and a lot of them question, some people are like, your standards aren't high enough, and then other people are like, your standards are like are up to snuff. But exactly what you guys were saying, like, you can have a long, very fruitful career of guiding without having any certifications, and that's the AMGA was kind of created post hoc to the guiding industry, whereas a lot of other countries, the international guiding was started first, and then the guiding happened. You know what I mean? Like first you had like, it's like trying to become a doctor. You're not just a doctor. Like you have to go to school and you have to get accredited. Right. Whereas in the U.S. it's just kind of like, hey, I'm a doctor. That's kind of a bad analogy, but I think like, the last couple of years, and that's kind of one of the reasons that we started going down the AMGA track was like employers were starting to be like, hey, what are your certifications? Hey, what are this and that? And I kind of think with this pandemic, like, it's expensive to be a member of the AMGA. Every year you have to pay X number of dollars. JT was alluded to those costs, and so was Ty. Like, and I think, like my kind of feeling is with the pandemic and the suppression of the economy and stuff like that, people might kind of be like, hey, you can work for us? Cool. Versus like, well, go get your AMGA thing. And the AMGA has been growing at such a rate too. Like I tried to take a course last year and they're like, nope, we're doing 3 courses a year. That's 30 people can get through the program, and 250 people applied for it. You're not in it.
Wow. One thing I thought too is, I mean, obviously there's future, there's people that want to be future guides, just like you guys, like kind of in that evolution. I was kind of curious too, like if you guys had to, kind of going away from just the AMGA track and all that, like being a guide, I'm curious just for like the average Joe, if you had to go back and like some of these, courses that you guys had to take that would make you a better backcountry skier, what would you guys recommend? Like if someone's like, hey, I kind of want to just be a little more proficient as a backcountry partner, like I guess maybe to be more specific, like which snow safety, like where could someone start on the snow safety side of things?
Well, with our company, we get a lot of people that call us up and are like, hey, can we be guides? And I'm, I know we're not talking about the AMGA, but like from an employer standpoint, it's also a different perspective. But the number one thing I say to people that want to be guides, and to be honest, it like kind of irks my soul to say this, and Madsen and JT probably know why, but like, become a ski patroller. That's not like a course, I know, but like, people come up and they're like, hey, I want to be a guide. I'm like, hey, go be a ski patroller.
That makes sense though. Just because I mean, you're that's I never thought about that, but I mean, you really are like keeping people safe, and you're working with snow, and you're working with maybe trauma and things like that.
Totally. And you're in a professional environment, and it opens a ton of doors. I've actually had a lot of doors closed to me because I didn't ski patrol, and I actually had to fight. It's funny, like JT was talking about, like, the pro skier thing has helped in a lot of ways, but not being a ski patroller has, like I said, has definitely kind of closed doors for me, and you kind of have to like circumnavigate that, and you can, but the ski patroller thing is that's like a no-brainer. Like, it's like be a guide.
Yeah, it's like that core skill set that takes to be a guide, and like the patrol skill set overlaps in that medical stuff and in that snow safety stuff. And those are like core technical skill sets for guiding. And then the other like more soft skills that are like the psychological stuff, like reading your clientele, like watching over your shoulder kind of nonchalantly and noticing that your client group is huffing and puffing and one guy's favoring his right knee, and every time you stop he's rubbing it out and things like that. Those are things that are more guide specific, but that's like stuff you can learn through the mentorship of the other guides you work with, whereas that ski patrol skill set is kind of like a lot of that stuff that we got through courses and stuff like that. Whereas
for sure,
ski patrol, that's like part of that world. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, that's actually, that makes a lot of sense in terms of just kind of like you said, a core skill set that, the background that we met each other in was more of like jumping off rocks, skiing powder, drinking beer. Probably not great resume builders for being.
Like, I mean, in like shamelessly admitting like us doing what we were doing and like pushing the envelope into terrain on big storm days, and like I always talk about it like, I don't care what anybody says, when you're an athlete, like you're ramping up the risk profile, right? Like you're trying to find big steep stuff, gnarly conditions in sunny slopes with a bunch of fresh new snow. You're getting fresh lines, and so like even in those factors alone, you're starting to ramp up your risk profile. And in doing that for a decade, you're gonna make mistakes. And like a lot of the experience I gained in having like being caught and carried in avalanches and making mistakes was like super good wisdom to a certain degree, where you're like, oh, I've made these mistakes, so I know what not to do, right? Like I've skied a slope that I was like, I dug a pit and I did all this stuff and I thought it was good, and then it wasn't, and I got caught in an avalanche, and that can happen. And people that are pros in the backcountry, like they all understand that, like if you spend that kind of time in that world, you're going to have those instances. And how do you act and react when it really matters, right? Like I took a level 2 course way back in the day, and we had a human trigger avalanche in the course where the instructor took a ride.
Wow.
And I'm in the class with all these people that like had no experience and were just taking the class like they're supposed to. And they freaked out in the middle of it. And one of the other instructors and myself like went into game mode and were like peeling skins and beacons out and like ready to run rescue on this guy. And after the fact in the briefing, like the other folks in the class were like, dude, you were on it. Like, and I'm like, well, that's the experience part. Like I've been in those scenarios. How do you act in the fog of chaos when everything hits the wall?
Yep.
That's like real stuff, and real mountain folks and mountain men and women.
Yeah.
They like that 1,000-mile stare, like.
Yeah. Well, just dealing under stress. I mean, that's got to be a
Right.
huge component of your guys' job these days is, there's like a leadership factor that's probably like paramount to people feeling comfortable and wanting to be out there, because it's you're guiding people to have a great day, but at the end of the day they need to come home alive and that's important.
Totally.
So
Yeah,
I've heard
and
the
you're
other
like,
way around is bad for business. I've just
that's
heard.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Weston, I'm sure you've gotten clients like this too, but you get on a ridge and Carol, 50-something, rare backcountry skier, starts to kind of freak out a little bit. And if she looks at you and you've got the 1,000-mile stare and you're like, look, Carol, you're going to be fine. This is this and this is that. You have that air of just another walk in the park. Like, that's something that instills a lot of trust from the client side into you as a guide, saying like, okay, yeah, we're fine. This guy knows what's up.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you guys about too is that kind of reminded me of that other conversation I was having with Ty, is about equipment, and just because the way that your clients look at you, and that kind of, we got into a discussion about telemark equipment, and I know that there's not a lot of guides per se that are on tele gear these days. It's kind of why I wanted to get both of you guys in the same conversation, because what do you guys like in terms of equipment these days, like specifically boots and bindings? Where are you guys at, like as telemarkers in a backcountry only scenario guiding? Are you guys using tech-toe stuff? Are you guys using non-tech-toe? Where are you guys at?
I'm tech-toe all the way.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Which bindings are you guys going to be using this next season?
I'm on the links.
Yeah, I was on Moonlight stuff last year and just rejoined teams with old Weston over at Volet, so I will be on that new Volet tech system that they've just announced. So.
Oh, sweet. So you haven't even been on that yet then.
No, it's really similar to the Moonlight system, so it shouldn't be too much different, but
yeah,
that's what I'll be on.
Yeah, that one looks cool from it's easy,
simple.
Yeah, it's just like very basic. Although the Lynx is really basic too. I mean, compared to, there's definitely some disadvantages to certain bindings just having too many parts. I'm sure you guys feel that when you guys, I always want, do you guys ever worry about that? Like especially when you guys are guiding out in the Uintas in Utah, and like JT, you'd mentioned, the snowmobile aspect, and that's one thing I think is pretty unique to Shaun and Weston's operation is you guys are, I mean, Weston, how far back are you guys driving the snowmobile in to get to like a base camp of sorts or starting point?
Sometimes it'll be like 20, 25 miles. Sometimes it's like
Whoa.
way, way, way back there.
Yeah. Do you take a lot of extra parts with you?
You know what's funny, and probably as soon as I say this, I'm going to totally jinx myself. But like, and even I hate to say it, but even going back to like the AMGA, they're like, oh well, here's your packing list, and you need to have this, and this, and JT kind of alluded to what I'm talking about but I don't. So to answer your question pretty bluntly, is I don't carry too much stuff. I always carry Volet straps, always carry a Leatherman, and what I try and my principles of guiding is not to be pushing people too far. And if people are going 110% or a little bonkers, like trying to rein it back in. Like, the Uintas, like there's times to go ski pow and to get a little nutso, like the central core of the Wasatch, like you're close to stuff. If you blow apart your stuff, if you blow apart yourself, like you can probably get down to a road. But so I kind of just try and keep it mellow. And what's odd is, I've had such good luck with the 22 stuff. Like Yeah, I've broken some stuff, but it's been like, okay, hey, that needs some addressing, sooner rather than later or something like that. And I've had just, things will get worn out or things will be a little quirky, but I don't carry too much. I'm starting to carry a little bit more, but I honestly never use it. So if I don't use it, I bail it from my pack, but that's mine.
Yeah. And GT, with in terms of binding parts, I mean, yeah, and if you're going to be running that volet stuff, I mean, it's basically, there's just like not a lot of, like basically if something breaks, it's going to probably be pretty catastrophic. It doesn't seem like there's a ton that maybe you could carry with you. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm sure Weston can remember some of my pack, but I'm that guy that brings everything plus the kitchen sink.
You've got like a 70-liter pack, like just open it up.
Straight up rocks.
I've always been that guy. But like with the Moonlight and with that new volet binding, it's a pretty simple binding. You can carry a few extra parts and you're pretty much covered. And then, like Weston mentioned, the volet strap. As you know, Madsen, you can fix absolutely anything in the world with a volet strap. And, we won't talk about that Tahoe experience when we brought the truck with the trailer with the hitch on the volet straps. But
yeah,
you can fix anything with a couple volet straps, which I always have about 10 of those in my pack at any given time. But the other thing with guiding that, and at least from the kind of guiding that seemingly Weston and I do a lot, is 90% of the clientele that we take out is not.
Oh yeah.
Is not like Johnny Go Rad. It's like Joey Public, like pretty
Johnny
chill,
Go Rad and Joey Public. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like when we were athletes and we're pushing huge stuff, hitting big stuff, and like really putting the gear to the limits. So, most of the time we're not pushing that gear to the point where we're going to be ripping out and stuff like that. And obviously that stuff can still happen from time to time, but
are you guys,
in those scenarios,
are you guys running
prepared?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was just going to say, are you guys running similar gear when you're just like, if you are doing personal skiing, in the backcountry? I mean, you're pretty much running the same setups.
I mean, I am now, but I'm almost 40 and really quite gray in the hair and beard.
Wise.
And,
You're wise.
Wise. Yeah. And I don't really ski. I still ski big stuff. I don't hit a ton of cliffs anymore like I used to and that kind of stuff. And in all reality, like last year, I really didn't free ski much between just working with Weston at Inspired, teaching and guiding at the university at Weber, and with Whisper Ridge and the Cats and Hellies. Like I was working almost every day, and the days I had off, I was usually like out scouting something for the client group I had coming the following day or two ahead of time. So I don't really have a whole lot of rowdy time like I used to, and when I do, it's more like my rowdy time now is training for this mountaineering skill set that I've got to get for AMGA track, which is a little bit out of my usual element. And like, that's why I like Weston and Shaun being in that world more than me. Or like, I was supposed to do a bunch of that with them this spring, but COVID kind of crashed those plans. So
yeah, no, I could see that. And that's the kind of the part nobody says is the more you get into working and skiing, oftentimes the less time you have to free ski by yourself.
Yeah, and then you're worked and it's like, oh, I have to do some laundry today.
Yeah.
And go to the grocery store.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we talked a little bit about binding. I was curious, do you guys, the boot topic is like the topic of gear that literally the internet breaks over every day in every...
And Fuego.
Yeah, and I'm curious, from guys, I mean, you guys are in your boots literally all day when you're working. And as far as like touring goes, whether it's free ski or at work, are you guys modifying your boots at all? I know, Weston, you were like one of the OG mod guys, with like modifying Maestrale cuffs on Scarpa TX Pros, which seems like everyone does now, but you were one of the first guys that I knew how to do it. Are you guys still doing that? Do you have a need for it? Waiting for new boots in general? Like what's the word on that?
I did a mod earlier last year where I took that Maestrale cuff, but I actually took one of the newer RS cuffs and shaved down a whole bunch of the Scafo. The Scafo, Madsen, what is it? Is it Scafo?
I think Scafo is the lower part.
Scafo.
Yeah.
So I modded that, but it honestly, like, it walked wonderful, but it skied like piss. And then I got on like my stock boots and I was like, dude, these ski so much better. So I've kind of stopped doing that. And the other thing I was going to, it kind of goes back to the gear too, and exactly what JT was saying. Like when we go out with clients, like it's why I love telemark, because it's so fun and it's so versatile. Like I said, I grew up at like a 600-foot mountain that kind of would bore you to tears, but telemark turned it into a 3,000-foot peak, or like kept me super interested and captivated. And when I go out touring and I'm with people, like, and I'm on heavier gear, that's fine. Like I need something, when you do it day in and day out, like I kind of need something to slow me down. And then like, so what, I'm working harder on the down, like that's what I need and that's what I love. So it's like, and I get it. I bitch about it too, but like get stronger. And
that's our telemark marketing pitch now.
Let's get stronger.
Just get stronger, okay?
You're weak.
I roll an older pair of TX Pros that still has the AT heel. Every once in a blue moon, I'll break out an Alpine AT pin ski, just if I've done like 3 weeks straight and I'm wrecked. I'll do that. But the thing with telemark that I think it's the age-old adage, but I've found it, especially when I'm cat skiing. I've got 2 guides and like a group of 12 or 14 people, and it's like we're going from like zone to zone to zone to zone to zone, and you roll up to a new zone, and I'm leading, and I can say, okay, tail guide, like entertain these folks for 5 minutes. I'm going to shuffle over here, dig a little hand pit, and like check out what I think would be a good run to ski. And I can shuffle over super easy, and like I got some Volley fish scale skis, and I can shuffle back super quick and easy on tele gear, and like I'm not AT shuffling around like locked in, and like that classic old like moving around in the mountains thing on tele gear with the guide world is like a godsend. And 2, like we'll ski a line and it's got a traverse going out the bottom, and I can set that traverse super fast with my heels free and shuffle through the traverse. Then the client group can come in, hit my traverse track, and just scoot out super easy. Whereas on days when I have my Alpine stuff on, it's like more difficult.
Yeah, it seems like I hear more and more.
Around.
It seems like that's cool how I feel like more and more people are talking about that. Just the idea that it's, JT, you always talk about all the different types of turns, and I think to make us a complete telemarker, you need to know how to do a parallel turn. You need to know how to do these things. But the idea that you can go in between all of those through these movements, I think it makes you a more complete skier. But it's kind of cool to hear how you guys are using it, maybe more in a sense with helping other people.
Yeah, you know me, like I'm all about the hippie crunchy styles of Alpine turns, and I got like 12 or 13 styles of tele turns in my bag, and I can break out 5 or 6 of them in a run and really style it up. But that utilitarian aspect for working is still, and that, that's been a part of the thing forever. All the old salty old dogs always talk about that, just moving around the mountains. But from the day-to-day guiding perspective, that utilitarian aspect is huge.
Yeah.
I've been dabbling. I've been known to dabble, and I've dabbled with, like, I have alpine gear and I got a split board and all that kind of stuff. And every time I get back on my telemark gear, I'm like, oh, thank God, because it just, like, there's certain things that alpine's way more efficient at, but then there's other times when I just have a smile on my face, or I'm not like, I'm hating life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's way easier to ski alpine, but it's super restrictive in the utilitarian aspect of things.
Super. And like exactly what you were saying, JT, about like breaking trail for clients or scooching along or like anything like that. It's all gravy on telemark gear.
Well, one thing I was gonna say, like, so if someone's gonna be coming on a guided trip and like doesn't have a lot of backcountry experience, like, do you guys provide, like, do you have to have any sort of background to do these trips, like in terms of avalanche training, or is it something? It just kind of depends on the group or the terrain.
I think the easy answer is no.
I'd for sure say the easy answer is no, and probably what JT and I both agree on. It's almost better if you don't have avalanche. I'd say that very tongue in cheek, because, you know, the more opinions, the better. But a lot of times people are like, try and tell you your job sometimes, or like, sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's always good to have people who are going to have some training and are going to act appropriately in the situation. But like, I know Shaun and Weston at They're Inspired have this mentorship program that, especially in the current climate with COVID, and they shut down the resorts, and all of a sudden backcountry had this huge boom of people buying backcountry gear and everybody's going to go skin. Like, that mentorship aspect is pretty rad. And you get these people hiring guides to be like, hey, teach a man to fish a little bit and like show me some stuff. And that's the way to do it. You know, like, you can take the courses and all that good stuff. But if you can hire a guide for a day and say, hey, I want to go skiing and ski good stuff, but also, you know, like, tell me what you're thinking about and tell me why we're going where we're going, and teach a man to fish a little bit. And like Shaun and Weston full have of like a mentorship program you can buy into. I think it's like 3 days, Weston? And
3 days. And that's the other thing too. That's like anything. It's like you learn the right kind of skills and muscle memory. You learn it the right way once versus trying to have to relearn it or break old bad habits.
Yeah. No, that's and with the COVID thing, I mean, do you guys, do you think it's going to affect like smaller operations like you guys, where the groups might not even be as big? Because it seems like that might actually be a better opportunity for people to get outside in the backcountry that might not have as much experience.
Yeah, it's like when you and I were texting the other day when you sent us that article, I kind of mentioned that aspect of it. Like, in that article, they're talking about like fewer trips, smaller groups, bad for business. But with the boom in interest, there's that type of thing. In Weston and Shaun and I are all avalanche instructors, and they have the mentorship program. I do intro to backcountry courses at the university. Like, there's that aspect of it that could be more business because more people are trying to do it now, and you've got more of that mentorship type clientele and less of like the super rich lawyers from Manhattan that want you to take them to go ski super deep POW, but way more of the folks who are like, they live in Salt Lake and they skied snowbird, and now they're looking at the backcountry going, yeah, I think maybe I'd be into that.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting winter for sure. I mean, like, especially if capacity's down at some of the resorts and stuff. I mean, that it's going to be interesting to see how people approach having to go hike, you know, like, and what kind of education they may or may not get, I guess, right. You know. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
Okay, in my estimation, I think next year, I think our service is going to be way up with tons of people like JT was talking about that that mentorship program we have. It's awesome. It's 3 days, getting people into it. It's definitely not an Avalanche 1 or an Avalanche 2 or anything like that. Kind of bridges the gap. It's not a certification of any sorts, but just people, hey, how do I put on my skins? How do I walk? How should my gait be? How do I do kick turns? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? So I think that it's going to be up in the short term, but then maybe in the long term, as people kind of get JT would talk about like the keys to the kingdom or something, then we might see a decline, but hopefully by that point there'll be that, something like that. But I think we're the way Shaun and I are approaching it is we're bracing for like insanity. Like we're thinking about getting another vehicle just to keep everybody separate and meet people and yeah, we think it's going to be because exactly what you guys were talking about, the reduced capacity of the resort, and then if the resort doesn't open, then would be even crazier.
Yeah, and I have heard from some resort stuff like the North American resorts, at least, that maybe the limited capacity, so it'll be. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I love that you have like a mentorship program though, because that seems like sometimes I feel like in the past not having something like that's almost like a barrier that may lead somebody to make a poor decision of just like, hey, I'm just gonna go. I think it's safe. No big deal.
My buddy says it's cool.
Yeah, or I've had people do that in the shop where they're like, oh, I want to just, I'm just going up to, this area, and it's like, you know the area, and you're like, okay, you're going by yourself. Do you have a beacon? And you're kind of like, hey, do you have a beacon? Yeah. And they're like, well, it's just like these cool little gullies and stuff. I'm walking around, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, so there's these things called terrain traps. Maybe, don't go by yourself.
You've heard of them.
Yeah, no, but right. I mean, yeah, like I'm sure you guys have had those conversations or seen people where it's almost like they don't have the ability, or they don't want to take an avalanche course that's going to take time, but then they think they're just going out in mountainous terrain without any experience or even a partner. Sometimes that's always what freaks me out, is like people not even going with anybody at all, which is
and they talk about how they're just going to take it really easy and ski some low, some chill stuff in Grizzly Gulch, and then it's like, well, go pull up that video of Amy Ingebrigtsen in Grizzly Gulch getting buried 6 feet deep, like right next to where those houses are.
Yep. Yeah. On
that tiny little slope with a giant terrain trap at the bottom of it that your average person is not going to think about it,
Yeah.
She's super stout, and she's still, like.
And the one thing too, and this was actually a Joey Toledo, aka JT Robinson, was the mountain credo about be a mentor, have a mentor, and what was the third part, JT?
Oh yeah, there's have a mentor, be a mentor, and oh geez, now I'm blanking it. It's that 3-part thing. It's basically like go be an apprentice underneath a mentor, and then have a peer that you go out and like test these stuffs with, and then be a mentor to somebody else. And like, even if you're like just took a level 1 and you go out with a buddy, if teach him up a little bit. And that's like I learned it from an old timer way back when I did my level 1 in Silverton. And that was how backcountry knowledge used to spread back in the day before all this stuff was around. Was like you'd have a mentor that would teach you, and then you'd go out with your buddy that's on the same level, and you'd test these things out. And then you have the young kid who just moved to the neighborhood, and you're teaching him up. So it's that like have a mentor, have a peer, and be a mentor.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be with a guy. Just go out with somebody who's been doing it for a while. And anyways, yeah, it's scary when you hear people talk like that, and you're just like, well, I wish you the best.
Yeah, I'm hoping that there's a 0 fatality year with every, like, if it really does go off like that, like, I think that's the only kind of scary part is all of a sudden everyone goes out, and then everyone's on top of each other and like doesn't know basic They don't have the basic core set of skills that you guys have been talking about.
Yeah, well, it's like the rise of this intro to backcountry type course has been, I think, really positive from the perspective. Before those kind of came about, it was like, take an FE1, go take an FE1. And then even if they took an FE1, like they still, they go into that course and they're super like self-conscious because they don't know how to put their skins on or anything like that. Yeah. But then they take this FE1 and they've got just enough knowledge to be dangerous. And then they're out like slogging around in the backcountry with this level 1 avalanche knowledge, but not very good on their skis. So like they are going up what they know is a safe route, but they are not very good at skinning because they don't have a good fundamental background. And they're like, well, that's going to be too hard to get up on that subbridge, so I'm going to go around and through this area that it just so happens to be a total start zone. And it's like, well, I can't get through here. I keep slipping back, or I can't get through here because I can't do that kick turn very well. So I'm going to cut through this area. And like, well, you don't want to cut through that area. Do you remember level 1 when they talked about start zones? Like, that's a total start zone. And that's going to be harder to skin up that part, but you'll be less exposed. That's
interesting. I guess I maybe have subconsciously thought about that, but that makes a really good point about your skill level with real basic ski stuff may affect your route finding decisions, you know?
Well, yeah, and your fitness and like you're getting gassed, sure. Right? Like you're skinning poorly, so you're getting worked, and then you're super tired and you make a bad decision because you're not thinking clearly because you're just worked and gassed. Yeah. And it's all part of the picture. That's where you do like an intro to backcountry and a level 1. Now you're setting yourself up better for success. And like kind of alluded to before, you're going to spend enough time out there, you're going to have interactions with avalanche situations and even like just dangerous situations that aren't avalanche related, but getting those fundamentals dialed will make that curve less steep of learning curve.
Practice.
Yeah, and setting yourself up for success. And it's like, it's the real, it's like, I mean, it's skiing, it's just skiing, but it can be life or death.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you guys are emphasizing that, because and that's a good way to look at it too, JT, is just kind of the well-roundedness of the whole thing. It's not just, like you said, when you were in that class and your life experience even, or just the practice you would put in the mountains in general, like you're not just like a deer in headlights the minute something goes wrong.
And, yeah, and that class was a level 2. So like all those people next to me had gone through a level 1, did a year of time, and then came into a level 2. But like most people, they don't see an avalanche or get into that experience most of their time out, and then all of a sudden they see this guy who is a super stout, he's the instructor, and gets caught in an avalanche and takes this big ride, and like they froze. And when we briefed after, like the instructor was super embarrassed and stuff afterwards, and I'm like, I talked to him afterwards, I'm like, dude, I know like that's obviously not what you want to have happen, but like those people, like they got a real experience out of that. Like
that was the best learning experience.
Exactly. Like to stand on that ridge and like be slipping in your own poop because you just saw someone go in an avalanche, and how do you react in that situation? Like you better do your homework and be studied and have this stuff to instinct level, because when the fog of chaos drops on you in an emergency situation, how you react is really a big part of the puzzle. And if you haven't done your homework and made it instinctual, you may not make good decisions.
Yeah, I love that.
Or just freak out in general.
Yeah, which is not what you want to be doing. Yeah. No.
I can go into like choosing your backcountry partner type stuff too. Like, I remember this. It's kind of a story I wanted to touch on at one point, but I mentioned that Tusher trip with me and Weston. Like him and I had skied a lot together and like done a bunch of stuff. And we went up. We were in the Tushers on this yurt trip, and we went up to I think it was Delano Peak, or however you say it. The rest of the crew went back, and Weston and I wanted to go check out this peak, and it was a super windy day, and it was kind of gnarly conditions, and there was wind loading, and we wanted to scout this section, and we were just going to go kind of take it easy. But like one thing, when we got up there, we're like in the howling wind, can barely speak to each other, and him and I were just operating. Like we'd been with each other a bunch, and there was like hand signal type stuff, and we knew where each other were going to be and where we should be. And we operated like clockwork, like a well-oiled machine. And we came down from that. And I don't even know if I ever mentioned anything to him about it, but like I think I told you about it, Madsen, when we got back from the trip. And I was like, me and Weston like gelled on that peak, and like we knew where each other were going. We knew how to operate. We were moving together. When we skied the line, we like took a super safe route and like leapfrogged it really well. And we're like totally on point as backcountry partners. And it was like the coolest thing. And that's like, after that, I was like, I know I can go. Like Weston and I are like good backcountry partners. We can go do cool stuff together because we're both super dialed, and we're on that wavelength now where like we have good training. We know what each other can do. We know where we're supposed to be. We don't even have to be able to talk to each other in a howling wind. We can like hand signal and like move through terrain.
Yeah, that's badass. And that adds a layer of comfortability too. Like not complacency, but comfortability, you know, where
Totally.
you can actually enjoy what you're doing even in a high stress scenario, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, that's rad. Well, we're before we I think that's a good note to end on, you guys. I wanted to, Weston, can you give the people a little synopsis of like where they can find out about yours and Shaun's operation and how they can contact you?
Yeah, so we're just inspiredsummit.com, and we're Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff, but usually info at inspiredsummit.com is super easy, and we'd love to get out with all the telemarketers, and we love going out with telemarketers. Shaun loves going out with telemarketers. So too.
Yeah, of course.
He broke up a little bit at the end there, but yeah, he said he loves getting out with telemarketers.
Yeah.
I'm not going to edit that one out, but
yeah, and they're based in Park City, and they do the Wasatch. They've got the Uintas. They have a pretty big range of service too. So
yeah,
we get into a lot of different stuff.
And JT, where are you going to be based out of this coming winter? Are you going to be with the same operations?
Basically, same operations. I've got my business vertical integration, and that's like the full service hosting aspect. And I book stuff all over northern Utah through Shaun and Weston. Like I said, we got the UNS, Park City, the Wasatch, and then up in Ogden, I've got the whole Ogden Wasatch. I've got some private stuff up there, and then I also work for Whisper Ridge, where we do helicopters and cat skiing up in Ogden as well. And then through VI, we do some international trips and stuff like that. Who knows what that looks like this year? So I'm playing that by ear in a big way, but that is more the full service aspect. Like, hit me up and I can get you into your lodging and get your breakfast burrito at this place is where you should go, and pick you up at the airport and stuff like that. And then you want to go ski rad stuff in the UNS, I hook up with Shaun and Weston and we go do that. So
I love it. And I'll put I'll make sure to put your guys' contact in the show notes so people can get a hold of you guys. And
for sure.
Yeah.
JT Robinson on the Insta.
Oh yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I'll put your guys' Instagram.
Joey Toledo.
Yeah, right. The classics. How many different combinations of J and T can you put together?
That's so funny.
This Tony Gill was an art form.
Yeah, he was.
Oh yeah, that is where Joey Toledo came from. I forgot.
Oh yeah, every time I see him, he uses like a different set of J and T.
That's so funny.
Johnny Thomas or whatever. You never know what he's going to come up with.
I love it. So
hey, and one.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Hey, and if I'm cutting in and out, I just wanted to add one quick thing to help break the internet, but they can only get they listen to the entire podcast, even with the pandemic. And I've heard a lot of things going on with shortages in the supply chain and all that stuff. But it seems like a certain project as far as footwear that's moving forward, even with all that other stuff going on.
Yes, that is true. And I had a podcast I did with Kim, and he left some good tidbits. Kim from Scarpa. For those of you that have not heard that, yeah, if you want some good boot knowledge, he opened up more than I thought he would about.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
I was geeking. I was cutting trail listening to that podcast. I was geeking so hard. And
Yeah.
it's like, yes, he's saying so much.
Yeah, he blew my cover for sure, and definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then but yeah, there's some good stuff on the horizon, I think, and that is a good note, and I'm hoping that hopefully sooner than later, get some feedback from guys like you guys that are out sitting in your boots for hours and hours on end. You know, I think it'll be good to hear your guys' feedback on that stuff.
Yeah, I was just talking to the Italians, and I was like, and I was really grateful to hear that it was going, because with in other aspects, like everything from skis and ordering and boots and raw materials, like the whole thing got jacked.
Yeah,
and I mean, whether or not the resort's open, and then it's going to be like, can people, like, you can't buy a bike right now. You can't buy.
Oh yeah.
it's done. Like,
yeah,
done.
I'm a Giant and mountain bike ambassador out here in Wisconsin, and my guy from Giant was like, we were worried about selling bikes, and then we were worried about making bikes, and now we're completely in the middle of the craziest bike boom ever, and we're completely sold out of bikes in the $1,000 category. Like,
that's funny, because I'm not even, you guys know I'm not much of a biker. I walked into a Walmart yesterday to pick up something, and literally I took a picture of the bike section because it looked like the apocalypse hit and everyone bought a bicycle, and I was laughing. I was like, because I remember JT, you told me that, and I was like, oh wow, well Walmart doesn't even have bikes for people. I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I get hit up so much from so many people about, I'm getting a bike, what should I get? Where should I go? I'm like, holy smokes.
Yeah. Should have done it 4 months ago.
Yeah,
it's great.
Plan ahead.
Things.
Yeah, plan ahead for your gear. Well, cool guys. Thanks so much for coming on. Like I said, I'll put some links to all these to JT and Weston's contact, so you hopefully can get some guided trips out here in the West. How you can support us: you can always make a donation of your choice to paypal.me/freeheellife. You can buy your gear at freeheellife.com. Don't wait too long, or they'll be sold out like bikes once we start getting stuff in. And then check out articles on telemarksgear.com, and you can always email me at podcast@freeheellife.com. So thanks for listening. Thanks again, you guys. And until next week, spread telemark always. Later.
You.
Woo!